Digitel is one of the leading companies helping associations leverage their content through event live streaming, webinars, and knowledge distribution. Take advantage of their 32 years of streaming success in generating revenue for their clients than any other company, hands down. For more information on Digitel, go to digitelinc.com.
Are you a follower? Okay, so we're gonna maybe add.
Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Executive Editor Beth Kormanik.
Welcome to GatherGeeks. David is away this week, so I'll be introducing our episode today. We are squarely in wedding season right now, and you're going to hear a conversation that David had with Alan Berg, who is an expert on the business of weddings and events. He was vice president of sales at The Knot, and today still consults for companies like Wedding Wire and speaks at industry events across the globe. We're going to hear Alan share some valuable insight for wedding planners and aspiring wedding planners. The number of weddings has stayed the same as our population has increased, so to be successful in this business, you have to know how to market to your audience and build your brand. He also will share how to parlay your experience in weddings into long-term relationships with clients, both with social celebrations throughout a lifetime, as well as those clients' corporate events like a holiday party or summer picnic. Let's take a listen.
So I wanted to really delve into the whole wedding industry. You know, David was telling me, David Liu, that 1 in 5 people that get married actually want to go become event organizers. Is that a number you know?
I don't know, 1 in 5, but that makes up a lot of the Association of Bridal Consultants. It's just one of those things where you think, well, if I did it, hey, I could do this for somebody else.
It's usually a disaster, right?
Well, what's the phrase now? It's frienders, friends who are vendors, right? So frienders.
Oh, say that again. Tell us about that.
Friends and vendors. So someone who says, I'll give you a good example. So my son's fiance is a photographer, and she's done some of her family and friends' weddings, but she got into the business the way that so many other people did, which is they were good at something, and then somebody suggested that they would do a wedding, whether it was for free or paid or whatever, and they become a vendor. So when she did it for her friend, the phrase that's come now, this mashup phrase, is called a friender, which is your friend who's a vendor. You and I know that what makes you a professional is not whether or not you're good at something. What makes you a professional is whether you work at being good at whatever that thing is, which is a great photographer doesn't make a great wedding photographer automatically because it's different. And people say, well, what's different if they're a great photographer? I said, a great wedding photographer knows what's going to happen, anticipates it, and can capture it because they've been there, they've done that. Whereas other people are going to have to react to, oh, look what's going on over there. You can know that it's going to happen because you've done 20, 30, 50, 100, 500 weddings before. And that's what makes a great wedding photographer, videographer, DJ, band, whatever.
Right, especially now with photography and things like that, basically being done on an iPhone, so you think everybody can be a photographer.
Remember the books that were, what were they called? A Day in the Life of America or something like that, where they gave people Instamatic cameras, right? Mm-hmm. not that a lot of people listening would know what an Instamatic camera is.
Yeah, I know we're dating ourselves here.
Yeah, but let's just say it's a camera with a head film and you had to get it developed, and they were not fancy cameras. No changeable lenses, no zooms, no wide angles, no nothing. Everybody, you leveled the playing field by giving everybody exactly the same equipment. And they went around the country literally on the same day or the same week, something like that. And people took pictures in different places. It must have been the same day. And they said, this is a day in the life of America as seen through the lens of all these different people. And the amazing pictures that people got with these crappy little cameras, because it wasn't just the camera. It was the person looking through the viewfinder.
It's who's looking through the lens.
Right. And that's how they see it differently. I have a son who's an artist. He's a graphic designer. And when he looks at someone and when he draws something, he sees things that the rest of us don't see. Even when he was a little kid, he would draw a picture of my wife, and he would notice her earrings and her glasses and the way her hair was and stuff like that. Whereas my older son, who is a financial analyst, he's a left brain, he would take inventory. She's got 2 eyes, she's got 2 ears, she's got a nose, she's got a mouth. Good, I'm done. Just the way that people see the world is differently. So having a skill, being a photographer, doesn't make you automatically a great any kind of photographer. You have to work at that. Why does somebody so good at taking landscapes? Well, because they've been taking landscapes for so long. I'm always reminded of Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers. Not The Outliers. Have you read that one?
Oh, yeah. No, I've seen him speak on that topic, too.
Right. So, the whole 10,000 hours, which is the whole debatable thing there. But, 10,000 hours, taking 10,000 landscape photos is going to be way better at it than somebody who's handed a camera, or he's even good at taking pet pictures, and then all of a sudden take a landscape. You have to work at that, and any skill.
So let's go back a little bit. Well, you are also one of the gurus and icons in the wedding business. And as we look at, from a BizBash perspective, we're looking at the morphing of all the event industry professions together. Yes, people can be an expert in weddings, but it seems like because they're an expert in weddings, they also are attracted to corporate events, and they're attracted to festivals, and they're attracted to conferences. Even though they may not be a specialist in that, it seems to be a feeder aspect of going into the wedding business and then going into these other aspects. Before we get into that, why don't you tell us, what is your journey and why do you love weddings so much?
Well, it's funny. I love the business of weddings. I'm not an expert on weddings. I tell people I've been in the industry for a very long time. I used to say how long. I'm not going to say how long anymore, but let's suffice it to say it's a long time. I'm an expert on the business of weddings and events. And what that means is that I can help pretty much anybody in the industry and help you find your customers, get those inquiries, make those sales, and then I'm done. Because I can't do your job. I was doing a mastermind group in the UK. It was me and 10 DJs. We sat around a boardroom table all day. They brought me in to do that. At the end of the day, one of the DJs said to me, "How long have you been a DJ?" And I said, "I've never been a DJ." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I've never been a DJ." He said, "But you know my business better than I do." I said, "Yeah, I do. I know your business better than you do. I can't be a DJ. I can't stand behind the console and get the dance floor packed and keep it packed. I don't know how to do that. That's not my skill. But finding your customer, helping you connect with them, helping you make a rapport with them, get that appointment, make that sale, and service that customer, I can help you do that."
Okay, but dig a little deeper. Dig a little deeper to that.
Yeah.
Don't you have to understand how the mentality of this DJ works in order to recommend how they can be successful? You must understand the DNA of what they do.
Right. And what I help people do is find their why. And just yesterday I was working with this entertainment company in Jersey, bands and DJs, and I'm looking at their website, I'm looking at their packages, and they're listing what they do. 4 hours of this, and this kind of lighting, and this kind of whatever. And I said, if I take your name off those lists, those packages, how many other entertainment companies can I put their name on that same list? And he looked and he said, every one of them. I said, exactly. I said, you're selling what you do, but you're not selling why they should hire you. And what I love to do is to help people find what's unique about them and why somebody should want them.
What are the various whys of a DJ? What differentiates one DJ from another? How have you sort of seen the analysis of what their why is?
The beautiful thing is that the why is available to every one of them if they would just look at their reviews and testimonials. Because what your customers say about you defines your brand. We don't get a chance to define our brand. What your brand actually is what people say about you.
Give us some concrete sort of, you don't have to mention the names of the companies, but what have they found? Like, what is company X? What have they found from their reviews, and how did they change how they market themselves?
So if you look at your reviews, you find words and phrases that come up again and again and again. I'll give you an example, actually, of a bridal shop. It's a bridal shop outside of Atlanta. Again, won't mention a name. I'm reading their reviews with them, and the word fun kept coming up. And I'm reading their reviews and going, wow, the word fun, I've never seen it come up that much for a bridal shop. I'm reading review after review where they said, we had such a fun time. They were so fun to work with. We found the perfect dress and it was so much fun. So the word fun is part of the DNA of that company. And that no matter who you deal with in that store, you're going to have fun. And that's not something every shop can say.
So when you do this kind of analysis, though, and you find that word or that why, are there businesses that are more successful even with a boring why? Or does it have to be something dynamic?
Well, that's the interesting thing is we're trying to attract a certain type of a customer. And when I see one that says professional over and over and over again, what I'm finding is that you as the business are portraying yourself a certain way, and you're attracting certain customers, kind of like fishing. You need to use the right bait.
Oh, okay.
So if you are a more reserved, let's say you come from the corporate world and you're used to being like the corporate world, and you're not like, hey, girlfriend, not like that. You're a much more reserved and professional. You're going to probably attract corporate professional types.
Right.
Just by the nature of who you are, that you write. A good example, yesterday I was working with this company, and I said, wow, you guys pulled out your thesaurus, because they were using all these $1.25 words all over the website wording that they wanted to use. And I said, we kind of need to write to what do they say, an 8th grade level or something like
right.
that. You don't want to talk down to people, but you also don't want people to have to pull out their dictionary when they're reading your website. So if you're looking for only intellectual types who are attracted to the $1.25 words, then by all means say ephemeral and all kinds of other words like that all over your website. But if that's not who your customer is, then you don't want them to say, oh, they're elitist, I don't want to deal with them. But if you're okay with that, if you say I'm looking for intellectual customers, then by all means, please write that way on your website, because you will exclude those other people.
So you need the right bait. That's really what you're coming down to.
Well, and that's what it is. So I've written 3 books. One of my books is about websites. You cannot design a website unless you know who you're designing it for. It would be like going to your interior decorator and saying, okay, here's the keys. I'm going away for 2 months. Just design it. And they're going to say, no, David, what do you want? No, you just do it. No, I'm not going to live there. You're going to live there. What do you want me to do? How do you live? Are you entertain? Big family, small family. You need to know all that stuff.
Right.
Well, I want you to find the persona. So they identify the persona. They design the area for that persona. They teach their people how to talk to that persona so that it matches.
Well, persona marketing is now the hottest thing going. We're hearing that everywhere. Doing it correctly is a different story. How do you approach persona marketing with your clients?
Well, what I do is I ask them, I said, so who is your target customer? I said, who do you really want to do business with? People with money. I was like, okay, wrong answer again. Right? So let's break this down some more. Of all the customers that you've done business with in the last 6 months, who have you had the most fun working with? What's common about them? Do they live in a certain area? Are they a certain age, certain education, certain jobs? What is it about them that made them that way? So try to identify people that you love doing business with. And I have this one DJ that I won't work with anymore because he's self-described. He said he's got ADD, and he does. And that's what makes him so great at his job. But every time I work with him, as soon as he hangs up the phone, it's like a butterfly and a squirrel go by, and he doesn't do anything that we talked about. And I said, Johnny, I'm not going to work with you anymore unless there's somebody else on the phone with us that's going to get these things done.
Are you seeing a big difference, between the people that service the corporate world and service the wedding world?
There is a difference, but what's changing is who's your corporate customer. Certainly you're dealing with people of different age groups over there. And what I'm finding that's working well for my customers is to be dealing with your corporate customers in a more personal way and a less Dear David way. And something that I said, you mentioned David Liu before, something that I said to David years ago when I was VP at the Knot. I went into his office because I had heard driving in that day that about the 10 best companies to work for, whatever that was. And I said, what are we doing to get on that list? And this was in the early days of the Knot, which, still build. And he said, nothing. We're kind of in churn and burn stage. I said, that doesn't work for me in sales. In sales, I want my people to stay there, make a lot of money, and be happy. We are a company of people, and we do business with people internally and externally. So you, the CEO, are my customer, but so is the receptionist, and vice versa. People do business with people they know, like, and trust, right? Companies are not doing business with companies. People are doing business with people. If you write me an email, and every time you write an email, it starts, Dear Alan, well, I'm going to reply, Dear David.
Right.
I'm going to do that.
Right.
But if you dropped it off, I'm dropping it off. Now, you're not going to get me to throw you a smiley face or an LOL unless you do that first. But certainly I have a certain line. But, it's not just about money.
You know, the interesting thing that you're also saying, and as we talk, I'm realizing it, that I've been doing some podcasts recently with all the big, huge companies that are now focusing more than ever on internal events. And what you're really saying is that these are family events, and you almost treat them just the way you would think about a wedding or a birthday event, because it is family that you're creating. And the more they invest in the internal, the better it is on the bottom line.
How do your people feel about you? Do they feel that you're supporting them as people, not just as, it's a time clock or it's did you get the job done? Efficiency is the enemy of family, right? What you just described as family. Efficiency is, did you get it done? It's not, is anybody happy about it? It's, did you get it done?
Right.
And what I want to know at the end of the day is, are you happy doing that job for that customer? And if the customer happy, and then I'm happy.
Because it still comes down to the Maya Angelou quote I keep repeating over and over again, that it's how you make them feel, not what they say.
People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. It's exactly right. You have people you don't like, and you don't remember why you don't like them. But
exactly.
You don't like them.
Exactly.
And then the opposite is, you have people that you love, and it's like, well, what have they done that makes you love them? I don't know.
There's just something that connects.
Who do you know that just being around them makes you feel great? And people start smiling in the room. And then I say, and who do you know that just being around them sucks the life out of you? And the room breaks up in laughter, and then I kind of break the tension and say, in life you choose your friends, not your family, right? So
that's so true.
But it is, and you think about it, we all know people that you just every time you're around them, you just feel great. And then we know people, it's like with Harry Potter, right? Voldemort, you just feel like the life is being sucked out of you if you're near them, because they just have that, their victim card that they're waving all the time.
Yep. Let's go. I want to go a little bit into the numbers in the wedding business. I think that people underestimate the strength of this market. And I'm sure you have your 30,000 foot view of what this industry is. Can you go into some of the most interesting facts?
There's about $70+ billion spent on weddings in the United States. And to give you a perspective on that, there's about a little over 2 million weddings. So actually, as a percentage of the population of the U.S., the number of weddings is going down, even though the number of weddings really isn't changing. There's something, the children of the baby boomers, called the echo boom, are of marrying age and have been for some time now. We haven't seen those kids getting married now because they're putting off marriage until later, not getting married, you're just living together. The stigma of having children outside of marriage is not there anymore.
It's not a threat to the industry? This is not a threat at all? Or is it?
Well, again, the population is there. The threat to the industry is that if this doesn't change, the next generation, which is your generation, not the millennials now, because that's getting married, those are the Generation Z, was a much smaller. So the children, Generation X, after the baby boomers, Generation X, was a much smaller population of babies than the baby boomers. So their children, by default, is a much smaller number than the millennials. Your Gen Z is going to be smaller. So it could be a threat. But when you read about this, people talk about people putting off marriage. Well, if you're putting it off, it means you're still getting married at some point. We'll see.
Does the spending go up or down as you get older?
Here's the thing. According to one of the surveys that the Knot did, 40% of straight couples are paying for the entire wedding themselves. And upwards of 70+% of same-sex couples are paying for the entire wedding themselves. So already you have a difference from years and years and years ago where it was expected that the bride's parents were going to pay for the wedding. So already we're at a point. The older they get, the more likely they're paying for it themselves. So the average spend isn't really that different as they get older, but they might spend it differently.
On quality, higher quality ingredients?
Right, because they understand value. And I think a lot more people now, because personalization, we talked about, personalizing things.
And is that still the case?
It is still the case.
This is something that they're going to celebrate and remember for the rest of their lives.
You're hoping one and done, right? I was just talking to my dad today. He's going to be 87 this year. Mom's 83, going to be 84. April 11th is going to be 63 years that they're married. Everybody that gets married is hoping that they're going to get there.
Well, I come at a little bit differently. My father wrote the book, The War of the Roses. So I see it from the exact opposite. that fundamentally helped.
But even you think of that. the War of the Roses, when they got married, did they think it was going to end up?
Never.
Right, and that's the thing, is you don't think it's going to go down in flames. Very often when it's a second marriage, it's a second marriage for one, not for both. So they're still doing it because they say, we want it to be done. And it's a great thing for the industry. I hate to say it, but in terms of money, I'm sure a lot of the money that's spent out of that $70 billion is on people who are second, third marriages.
So who spends the money? I mean, is it the aspirational bride who has been thinking about doing a party before they even thought about who the person's going to be, or is it? When does this decision to have your event?
So it's funny because you described what we used to call at the knot, the everything but the groom. That was the one. The guy that she's waiting for is just the guy on top of the cake, the little cake topper guy. She just needs him because everything else is already planned out.
So does that go back to the premise I mentioned, that so many people really love this business and they actually are just looking for an excuse to get into our business?
Well, there's a glamorization of the business, and certainly the movies, the wedding planner and the father of the bride and all these kind of things can all kind of glamorize any industry. And certainly this industry is one where a lot of money is being spent. It's a big deal. And, until you've done it, you don't really realize what goes into it. And that's the thing, you and I have seen behind the scenes. Right?
Yep.
We've had the curtain pulled back, we know.
But then the people that depreciate it love it, and they love being behind the scenes, and they love the whole aspect of it. I mean, this is kind of, we found at BizBash that event planners are an it job in almost every company. And many times the first time that they even think about being drafted as the event person is because they sort of have an affinity for weddings and parties, and they know where things are, and they're sort of the tastemakers in their companies.
And they got that way usually by default.
Right.
Somebody, they stepped up and somebody said, okay, we need to plan a party, and they're like, okay, I'll help. And they do, and it goes well. So what happens? You become the go-to.
It's so funny that the first year in these tech companies, the first year that an event, somebody has chosen to be their event person because they love doing this stuff, they put a lot of money into the flower budget. The second year, they put zero money into the flower budget because they realize that it's a lot different than a wedding, even though flowers are still an important aspect of an image that they're trying to portray.
And you know what? But it's about priorities.
Yeah.
It's always about priorities. And think about, what do your friends and family like to eat, drink? What music do they like? What do they like to dance to? What designs do they like? If you're creating a wedding, you should be creating it for the people that are coming. Should it reflect your personality? Yes. Should it reflect individual things about you? Yes.
That what you're saying is interesting, because what we're hearing in the corporate side and in sort of the bigger picture side is that more vendors are getting earlier involved in the strategy because they've seen it all, and they've eye-rolled at every decision that everyone has ever made that when they're not asked. And you're seeing you're getting free consulting when you bring the people in earlier, and they work as teams and units, because really these wedding groups are really teams. They're not really, you don't hire one person, you're really hiring their whole team of the vendors that they like.
Which would be a great way to do it, because they work together well, they're going to share ideas, the timeline's going to be shared.
What about going to pricing a little bit? I always hear this story about the bride and groom that go into a venue, and the bride is so excited and they show off their huge ring to the venue owner, and the whole pricing changes dramatically. So the advice is never to wear your ring when you go shopping for venues.
Well, there's different parts to it. I mean, if you've ever read the book The Millionaire Next Door, the people that have money aren't always the people that look like they have money. And it's somebody that's a blue-collar worker that's been saving his whole life for his little girl's wedding and has saved up, $50,000 when the average in that market is $30,000, and they're going to spend $50,000. Well, if you judge them by the, 10-year-old car or whatever, you could be missing out on real money. And something I learned a long, long time ago, working in retail-type environments, is you just don't judge people.
The pricing models on weddings, should you be looking at everything with a jaundiced eye because there's so many commissions everywhere? Is the commission side of this hurting the business? You don't see it as much on the corporate side because people are doing one-time buys on this. They're not the educated consumer. I guess it's the reason why the event organizer and the event planner sometimes get commissions on everything, and so you never really know the pricing.
Well, it's interesting thing, and you're in New York, and I've lived in the New York area my entire life. So our view of that particular system, the commission system, is very skewed because that's what we see around us. I've spoken in 11 countries, and I've spoken in 37 states. It's not the case everywhere. That's not the model.
What's the model?
Everywhere. The model is that people get referred because they know that they do a good job. And there are places where there is no commission. Matter of fact, if you mention it, I just had somebody saying this to me 2 days ago. They mentioned to a venue, hey, I'd love to be referred by you. Do you want a referral fee or whatever? And they were insulted that they would ask them about a referral fee because they said, we just don't do that here. It's definitely something in the New York area, Long Island. It's definitely not the case everywhere. And I think it's important to be transparent with your customer on that.
Absolutely.
Because, if you're an event planner, are you charging them for your time? Are you charging them for your expertise? Are you charging them for bringing you to certain vendors? Are the vendors paying you on top of them paying you? Are the vendors paying instead of you paying them? What is the model that you're working with there? And I think transparency is always
it got so bad here, I think, in times. I don't think it's as bad anymore. But the F&B managers in hotels were holding up people at the last minute and saying, oh, my God, I can't get more staff. And these are some of the top people with the richest people in town are getting held up by the F&B guys. I don't know if you've heard any of that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because we're always going to hear those kind of horror stories, and just anybody taking advantage of anyone at any point is not good.
Yeah,
it's not a good long-term strategy. I was working with somebody who's kind of new in my industry, and I was talking about the concept of long-term value of a relationship. And if you want to have a long-term value relationship, you can't look at this event and say it's one and done.
Right.
It's a wedding. There's 150, 200 people there that are potential customers. One of my wedding customers was saying, I like to get more corporate business. I said, how many weddings did you do last year? They said 400. I said, I'm imagining that some of those people work. And then some of those people know people who work, and that some of those people own companies, and then they also know people who have kids who are turning 13 and need bar mitzvahs, and 15 need quinceañeras, and 16 need sweet 16s. I said, mind your current customers and get the long-term value to increase.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. We do our trade show. We're doing our trade show on October, I think it's 25th in New York, and in the late afternoon, we're actually opening it up to a bridal event because we believe that the brides are the Trojan horses into the businesses in New York, especially because it's all that corporate business. And they're so all of a sudden very interested in events. So they're going to look at everything, and they're going to influence their entire company and everyone they're with because they're thinking about an event.
I always say that there's only 3 times you should ever ask for referrals, and one is before the sale. Because if they refer a friend or a company or whatever, and that other person or company does business with you, it reinforces that they should probably do business with you as well. You should also ask for referrals when you make the sale because they want to reinforce their purchase decision as well, and they're feeling very good about you. And then you should ask for referrals after the sale because you did a great job, and they're going to be very high on you, and they should do that. So, which is basically saying you should always be asking for referrals. And if you as a business never want to make a cold call, you should just be asking for referrals. Who do you know? It's always the question, by the way, is who do you know? Not do you know anyone. That's a yes or no question that they could just say no, and you're done.
Well, I guess we're looking at it, the venue is the central spoke, and they take any kind of business for the most part. So you're seeing the venue go after the corporate and the nonprofit and the wedding and the social and everything.
Well, but sometimes because there are some venues that concentrate on weddings. There are other venues that concentrate on corporate. Hotels, we know there's some hotels that are all about corporate business until the economy tanks. And as soon as the economy tanks, they're looking for social business because social business is recession resistant. Kids are turning 13, 15, 16. People are getting married. That is recession resistant business. Weddings especially. Weddings more so than maybe sweet 16s or something like that. But weddings are happening all the time. Bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs are happening all the time. They're recession-resistant businesses. But when a hotel, let's say like in Midtown Manhattan, a hotel that's doing corporate business, and does, a dozen weddings a year, and all of a sudden the stock market tanks, the economy tanks, let's talk 2008, right, 2009, and what did they do? They hadn't put a dime into advertising for weddings, and all of a sudden they're like, we need to get weddings in here, because the weddings are still happening. So it really comes down to kind of their priorities. But I know many venues that are like, we'll take the corporate business if it comes along, but we don't look for it.
How big do you think that the vendor community is in the wedding space? I mean, it seems to be pretty like one of the biggest small businesses in the world.
It is. It's some people will say it's around 50,000. I've had other people say it's 200,000. Because if you count anybody that does one wedding a year, there's a very, very low or no barrier to entry.
Right.
You don't need a license for almost every business, right? Caterers, you need your food license and stuff like that. But you don't need a license and any training, really, any formal training to be a wedding fill-in-the-blank planner, photographer, florist, whatever. You just need to say, I am, and you are to people. You're not, but you are. And funny thing is, when I'm speaking to more experienced people who are complaining about all these newcomers, I always throw them turn the mirror on them, and I say, how many of you were ever new in business once? And they're like, I said, when you were new in business, were you by any chance the lowest priced one in your market? And they go, yeah. I said, and you're complaining about the people who are doing what you did. That's what you're doing. And they're like, yeah, I guess so.
So I'm going to end this on a question about, I think I asked you this, I started asking this in the beginning, like, why do you love this business so much?
I love the passion that people have that brings them into this business. They love baking cakes, and somebody says, can you make a cake for a wedding? Yeah, I can make a cake for a wedding. And then somebody sees it and says, wow, that was the best cake I've ever tasted. That was beautiful. Could you make one for my wedding? And now they have a business. And I love helping those people realize that they can have a legitimate business if they charge enough money for the services and the time that they put in. And my payback is not my paycheck. My payback is the testimonials from people when they write to me or write on a website or tweet or whatever and talk about how their business is better off and they get to do more of what they love. Because that's what I do, David. I help people who are really good at something do more of that and get paid fairly for it so they can do a great job for people. You know what the other side is? They go back to getting a 9-to-5 job somewhere and, do it on the side.
Yeah, I guess also the interesting thing is that the relationships between the bride and groom and the family and the customers and the vendors become lifelong events. And they end up getting work for the birthdays and the bar mitzvahs and all the other religious and non-religious events of the lives of the next generation of their families.
And families, friends. I mean, the venue that I got married in Long Island, my brother-in-law got married there 4 years later, and his sister-in-law 2 years after that.
Yep. So never.
The band that we had was the band that did my sister's wedding the year before.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you have this ability to do more and more of that, but what I love about the industry, besides the fact that it's recession resistant, which isn't a bad place to be, and the funny thing is when the economy is bad, people look to, I need to market myself more, which makes my business even better.
Yeah, we have the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. But it's great people. I mean, I've made such relationships with people over the years. And again, I've been in the business over 25 years. And I know people for a long time, and I'm working with sometimes their kids now and stuff like that. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful business because we are trying to be part of it. Now, maybe because I've been happily married for a long time, maybe I have a soft spot to it. And I want people to be part of that, whatever. But I have, we have friends that are divorced, remarried, stuff like that. But I fell into the business. I got to tell you, let's step back real quick before we end. I got into the business because my best friend at the time bought a franchise of a wedding magazine. It was a commission-only job. No salary, no draw, no base, no minimum, no guarantee. I gave back my company car from the other place I worked and my benefits and went out with a 1099 and my wife was pregnant, and my older son was only 3, and I took that leap of faith. And over 25 years later, here I am, because it just flew by, because I just love it.
So with that in mind, can you tell our listeners how to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. My website is alanberg.com, which is ALANBERG.com. You can find me as at Alan Berg on most of the social media places. Facebook, I'm Alan Berg Speaker, or Alan Berg number 1. And I'm a speaker, I'm an author, I'm a coach. I've written 3 books, and I love helping people have better businesses.
Great. Thanks so much, Alan.
Maybe you'll see me at BizBash.
Absolutely. We look forward to it. Thanks.
Now that you've heard the last word from David and Alan, I wanted to add a few thoughts before we sign off. We've had weddings on our mind here at BizBash. As David mentioned, we are hosting our first consumer wedding event, the Wedding Show for Something Different, that will take place October 25th at the Javits Center here in New York. It's co-located with our BizBash live show and is suited for brides and grooms, as well as planners who want to connect with suppliers and learn from the educational components at the show. Registration is happening now, and you can find details on the show's Instagram feed at BizBash Weddings. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next week with another Gather Geeks.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the Gather Geeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks, or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of Gather Geeks. Until then, gather on. If you are looking for a state-of-the-art learning management system, take a look at Digitel's newest platform, Opus DX. Opus DX offers the robust platform for event organizers and associations to manage content. To learn more and schedule a demo, email them at contactus@digitelinc.com. That's contact us at digitellinc.com.